Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be starting a bit of a new series called the After Action Report, where I review games that I either do by myself or I do with friends, explain what's going on, go more in depth about different strategies, why I do certain things, and hopefully by watching this and seeing the highlights, you will be able to improve as a player and come up with some new ideas of your own. So I'm going to be taking up a bit of a more defensive position here in the center. Ideally, the enemy won't push there very hard, so I'm bringing a few Pack 40s, which I can set up to hopefully knock out any enemy tanks that might try to probe this area. And the idea is that I will be able to just sit here, not really do a whole lot, and be able to redirect my income elsewhere, either to help on the right, or maybe help here in the town. So for this game, I am playing as 1st Lovas, the mechanized Hungarian division. Epico is playing as 2nd Pansalos, a Hungarian armored division, and Chabertin is playing as 17th Divisiona, so a Finnish division. So to help with the taking of this town, I've also sent up a 75mm field gun to hopefully suppress any enemy troops that are inside of the town. Hopefully knock out that Hotchkiss as well. So this is actually a pretty good use of the Superi team, where he was able to quickly move into the town before any of our other troops were in the town, and he actually did a lot of damage to that Pack 40. Over here, that 37mm gun is actually doing quite a bit of damage to our troops. They actually knocked out one of the vehicles, killing most of the Hungarian 3 machine gun squad here. Also a Hotchkiss set up in this forest here. Now I know it looks bad, and it is pretty bad. Stuck in a bit of a pincer right now. They got 37mm, which can provide high explosive fire support. They got the Hotchkiss, which can pin down my troops. Yeah, things aren't looking too great right now. Meanwhile, over on the other side, the rush, at the very least, is actually working for the most part. So hopefully we can get a couple of, we can hopefully get an early point advantage, start ticking down the enemy's tickets. So hopefully things go well over here. So I actually shifted over the Pack 40 that had nearly died to try and help with the armored units in this area. Unfortunately, it was quickly destroyed because it had no health. At least the Pack 40s are able to sort of help each other so that Hotchkiss doesn't do too much damage to them. Because by the time the Hotchkiss pins one down, the other one gets unpinned. So the Hotchkiss is just constantly switching back and forth between the two guns. So it doesn't have enough time to actually get its accuracy up to actually start dealing damage. And I'm able to send in a small squad of infantry, or a large squad of infantry actually, to try and deal with that Hotchkiss. And hopefully with that Pack 38 at the same time. So at this point, my troops that I had sent to go try and apply pressure to the town have been destroyed. So I'm going to try and send in a recon unit to hopefully be able to spot the enemy so I can try and use the Pack 40s to destroy the enemy vehicles over here. Unfortunately, I don't think the recon motorcycle is actually going to make it to the point. I think it gets destroyed. Yeah, it gets destroyed by a tank sitting in the town. Fortunately, the 38Ts that the Bulgarians sent to go help attack Epico's town were able to be destroyed by my 75. Sadly, we will lose this Pack 40 to the Emcha, but at least the enemy push with the tanks has been destroyed. And if I can beat the Tanko Desaniki and the M2A1, hopefully we can retake this flag using a couple squads of infantry and a supporting tank leader. Yeah, so I saw that my command squad, my leader squad, was getting harassed by this Emcha. So I wanted to try and withdraw it, and then set up the Pak-40 to knock out the MCHA. Unfortunately, it does get distracted with the Pak-30A over here, so it's unable to destroy the MCHA before my leader squad is unfortunately killed. Over here, I have a Panzer 38T moving up to try and knock out the Stug over here. It is engaged by an Su-85, and I thought for sure that the Su-85 was actually going to win this fight. Luckily, the shell didn't pen, it only knocked out the driver, and the IS-2 missed all of its shots. So the Panzer 38T is able to withdraw back into the forest. It takes a little bit of damage from the 76, but at least it survived. Really not a fan of these recon Dushka, these universal carriers with the Dushkas. They're actually a pretty significant threat to my forward recon units, because those Dushka vehicles can actually spot. They can actually spot my small recon squads if they get too close, which is a real bit of a threat. The enemy set up some light artillery pieces, some 75s. I would like to knock them out at some point. I just don't have any long-ranged artillery, unfortunately. My best artillery for this division setup right now is just some 82mm mortars. So actually knocking out the enemy artillery is something that I just can't do right now. If I could, I would have already done it. Unfortunately, that's just bad luck with the road this unit decided to come down. This unit's probably going to be destroyed, and I didn't even know that it was stuck out in the open. Unfortunately, the Panzers don't come with a lot of HE shells, so although I want them to provide fire support to knock out the 76 here, that's just unfortunately not an option. Tank Desaniki are a major threat at close range, so being able to knock them out with this infantry squad would be a very big deal, considering that he brought them all in A phase, meaning that he only has around 8 of them. Now there are T-34 85 1944 models over in this area that I'm aware of. They can outrange and destroy my Panzer 38Ts, so I want to bring up the 80mm to act as both a support gun as well as an anti-tank gun. The problem is that the only forested area is down here, and it's already occupied by the Panzer, meaning that if I was to set up the 80mm down here, artillery would start being shot at it, and it would possibly wind up destroying the Panzer 38T. Epico's trying to support me with some heavier tanks, including Panthers, and later on he'll be trying to support me with Tigers. So if I can destroy those Romanian 75s, that'll be a major success, just because those are the main threat to Epico's tanks right now. Yeah, so it doesn't take long for the enemy to notice the 80mm and start firing artillery at it. Unfortunately, I will lose the 80mm eventually, but at least for the meantime, it'll be able to be a bit of a distraction for the enemy. My original plan to just sit here and wait for the enemy to come to me and hopefully send my troops elsewhere was not super successful. I had to have Epico send some tanks over to help me out, just because I didn't have enough troops to actually occupy this whole front line. So at this point, I did start bringing in mortars to help start harassing the enemy, suppressing troops inside of this town, destroying what I can. As long as I keep one squad of infantry in this forest, it should prevent the enemy from trying to push with infantry. Yeah, so the Stug here will actually knock out the Tiger tank. Being that the Stug is the biggest threat here, once I destroy the Emcha with the Panzer 38T, Epico will attack the Stug from the right, and I will attack the Stug from the left. And with the destruction of that Stug, their main anti-tank unit in this area will at least have been destroyed. Even though Epico's Stug was destroyed, the Panzer managed to get out of the battle relatively unscathed. If it had more HE shells, it would have been great to have pushed it up to knock out that AA gun. Fortunately, I was able to find the artillery observer, so at least those 75mm guns would be less useful if we're trying to suppress the front line. So now I'm going to send up the leader tank to go try and help the Panzer 38T by giving it more veterancy. Unfortunately, it will get destroyed by those T-3485s before the leader tank is able to make it there. Wish I had moved the leader unit up to here. I believe that 76 actually comes down this road, spots it, and destroys it. But at this point is when things start to really turn around on our side, because we start to bring out some Turán tanks to start doing some quick thrusts. The Turán is such a fantastic tank in this game. It's not good in the traditional sense of like having good armor or a good gun like the Tiger or Panther, but the Turán 2's main benefit is that it's basically a really cheap 75mm field gun on tracks. It's decently fast for what it is, and it's very fast firing. The heat shell can pen just about any of the common anti-tank, of the common allied tanks. 76 T-34s, 85 T-34s, Sherman 76s, all of those tanks have a decent chance of being penetrated by the heat shell from the Turán 2. Because the thing is, with the AP shell, because AP shells lose penetration over distance, by the time the shell hits the tank, a lot of its penetration value has already been lost. But with the heat shell, even though it seems rather trash at 90mm, the fact that it doesn't lose that penetration over distance actually means that by the time it impacts the enemy, that 90mm worth of pen is actually fairly average. It's actually a pretty okay amount of penetration. So I believe the Turán 2 got hit with bombs. Could be mistaken, but I believe it got hit with bombs. And that's why the crew panicked. It began falling back. It moved into the open and was destroyed by T-3485s. So what I want to do with these Turán 2s is push them up with the heat shells and hopefully knock out the T-34-85s while the mortars stress out the tanks so that they're less accurate, and hopefully they'll miss the first shots on the Turán. So really for like the majority of this match, this is the main alley for combat. Not a lot happens really over here. So the enemies start sending in IL-2s to harass Epico's Tigers. So around this time is when I start actually investing into Nimrods and other anti-aircraft units. Oh wow, I actually managed to get a hit with the mortars. When I originally fired those mortars, had I noticed that the tanks had moved away, I probably would have stopped firing, but it's probably a good thing that I missed that. A couple of Panzer IVs, Cromwell, and a Sherman are pushing down this road. Move up a Pack 40 that I had set up. I kind of expected them to do an armored thrust this way, so I had actually set up a Pack 40 next to this Turán and other leader unit. So that way when they push down, they'd have good veterancy. Now I do want to move the Pack 40 away because I know the enemy's going to immediately try to artillery it. I'm not sure if they actually do or not, but I assume that they are going to try and artillery it, so I want to move it away from the leader units. Yep, there it is. Set up the Nimrod in a nice spot here. I'm not entirely sure why the Nimrod's not able to look down this road. I think that's just a map error. But as long as I have it, it's a very good spot to have it. It's all open. The enemy doesn't have a line of sight with it. It's a good spot to set up an AA gun. So at this point, really want to break the stalemate that's happening over here. We're starting to lose the flags on the right. We did push them back in the center. Now we're basically back to where the game started. So something at this point needs to change. I just want to try and get these Turáns to the front line as quickly as possible before the enemy notices them and starts trying to hit them with artillery. So the plan, as of right now, is we're going to set up the Turáns here with the assistance of Epico's Tigers, which will take the hits. Because they're the larger tanks, the enemy anti-tank guns and enemy tanks are going to target the Tigers first, while the Turáns push forward, destroying enemy infantry, destroying any medium tanks that they happen to come across. A player playing as 1st SS Panzer is actually able to push into the town from the flank, as well as seize their flag that's on this main highway, which will significantly aid this Turán 2 push that's going to happen here shortly. Also moved up a Pack 40 just to look down this road so they can't send any more tanks down it. So I know I mentioned this earlier about how the Turáns act as basically a rapid-fire infantry support gun. The fact that they're only 40 points means that for every regular medium tank that, like, the Bulgarians can field or the Americans can field, their tanks will cost somewhere between like 70 and 110 points depending on what tank they buy. Meaning that a Turán 2, which is only 40 points, is really only around half the price of these other tanks, meaning that you can field twice as many tanks as they can. And like I said earlier with the heat shell, eventually you're going to hit the enemy tank, and eventually the shell is going to pin. Yeah, unfortunately, they did start trying to counter battery my mortars at this point, and they did knock out the supply truck. Unfortunately, I don't think they ever knock out the mortar, but at the same time, I don't think I use the mortars for the rest of the match after this point because I'm too busy microing the Turán 2s. Yeah, so we spot a dozer, so the enemy recon is gone. We push up on the sappers and the partisans that are in here. Really, it doesn't matter that the T-3485 has the range on us and is able to fire on us. Because it's firing it fired an APCR shell, it did very little damage to the Turans. Yeah, so the enemy in this forest is completely overwhelmed, destroyed. The tanks are able to continue pushing up. The Tigers sit in the back, cleaning up anyone that's left behind. And the beautiful thing about the Turans is just volley firing. Volley firing is so much fun to watch. You just form a line with them and just, if not destroy the enemy, you significantly suppress them. Really, the loss of these Turans doesn't really make all that much of a difference. Just because first Lovas, if you bring them all in C like I did, you get 40 of them. So the loss of these 10 Turán 2s just is completely irrelevant at the end of the day. Especially since we were able to push forward and completely secure this point. I don't think the enemy will retake it for the rest of the match. Plus, with the enemy T-3485 falling back over here and blocking the line of sight with the T-3485 over here, the Turans are able to push all the way through to the enemy backline and start knocking out artillery and anti-aircraft guns. Quick, unexpected armored thrusts are the Turán 2's bread and butter. Had this Valentine tank not been here to destroy a good portion of those Turán 2s, we more than likely would have broken through, knocked out this 37, knocked out this CSU. We might have even gone all the way to knocking out this 120mm. So at this point, I am building up the mother of all Turán pushes to just absolutely obliterate the enemy. The enemy IL-2 pushes are no longer able to get through just because we have so many Marauders set up. The mortars, we've actually pushed up so far at this point that the mortars don't really have the range to do all that much anymore. Sadly, Epico will start to lose this town a little bit, but at this point it doesn't really make much of a difference. We have even though we lost the right flank at this point, we do still have the flag advantage over the enemy. We were able to push them back on the left, and we were also able to take some of these flags in the center right.
Comrade!
So around this point, it's around this time that I realize a couple of things. the enemy
Товарищ,
presence
не
over on the right,
стреляй!
right? So we're losing. The enemy's main tanks consist of M10s and Shermans, which the Turán 2s are more than capable of destroying. So they're struggling a little bit on the right. The enemy's captured the 2 flags. We're winning, but we're not going to win before we run out of time. So even though I am setting up my tanks to do a push over here, it might actually be a better idea to do a push on the right, because my tanks are made more for close quarters fighting. So back over in the town area, they've started deploying 1943 IS-2s, which my tanks can't really deal with. We could potentially destroy them if they came close enough that we could fire HE shells at them. That is the only situation where these Turáns would actually beat an IS-2. Unless we maybe suppress them at close range and then force them to surrender. Epico has also began putting together an armored force consisting of Panzer IVs and his Tigers. We both pretty quickly come to the same conclusion that his tanks are better at fighting in this area than mine, and that I should shift my focus more towards the right. So I'll start moving my, yep, there we go. Start moving my tanks over to the right, so I can start doing a push on the right, so we can retake those flags. So just gathering up every Turán that I have available for this last push. Not really a last push, but definitely a breakthrough. Epico's Panzer IVs start getting artillery, so he has to start pulling them back. Somebody dropped artillery onto the IS-2s. Now,
Sérültünk van!
well, sending my Turán 2s through this forest to do a breakthrough is an excellent idea on paper. If the enemy has a bazooka team in there, even though, if they have like anti-tank squads, like armored riflemen, American rifles with bazookas, stuff like that, if they have a bunch of those squads in here, my armor push isn't going to go very far. So, come up with a basic solution, and this is where off-map is most applicable. It's the situation where it can best be applied. So I'm going to call in a off-map vehicle with 105s, which I can then use to suppress this area. So that way, the enemy's all pinned down. If they do have bazookas, it won't matter, because when my tanks go through, they'll just surrender right away. Is kind of the idea here. Epico has also called in his own 105 off-map to try and deal with the IS-2s over here. A big issue that a lot of players unfortunately seem to have is they forget about their troops in the back. So a perfect example is I forgot about my Yay Panzer 38T here, I forgot about my recon squad here, kind of forgot about my leader and my infantry squad here and here. This Pack 40 is just sitting there not really doing anything. If players applied all of their forces to the front line instead of just focusing on what's immediately there, that could often turn the tide of a lot of these games. And it seems like the enemy's doing their own vehicle rush here. My biggest concern at this point are the jumbos, because no matter what I do, there's very little chance that I'll be able to destroy a jumbo before he's able to completely just slam the door in the face of my armored push. Now, it was a little bit of a mistake of mine to set up my armored push next to a mortar, the 120 mortar. I know I've talked about it in I've talked about it in my basic guide to Steel Division, where I go over some of the basics and the mechanics. But the problem with the 120 is, even though mortars can't be counter-batteried, they fire so slow, the 120s, that the enemy can just spot them and then manually counter-battery them, which is a bit of a problem for my tanks.
Sérültünk van.
Enemy's trying to push with the IS-2s. They won't be able to get very far unless they have the infantry to help take back this town. Calling the off map, the enemy has been pinned down. So the first one was a normal fire for effect artillery strike. So even though the timer's longer, it fires off all of its shells very quickly. The enemy was pinned down. I was concerned that by the time it arrived, that the enemy would have been unpinned. So I call in another emergency off-map strike to pin the enemy down again, pin down anything beyond the forest, and have it continue to fire until my tanks were able to be in position to push through this lighter forest area. Now, for this armored push, I will also have the assistance of Epco's Panzer IVs and some of the heavy tanks from the other two players on this right flank. Unfortunately, Chopperton's best tanks are T-26s, which would be great at suppressing enemy vehicles just due to their rapid fire from the 45s. So right now, I'm just kind of waiting for the artillery barrage to finish firing, and as soon as it gets close, I'm just gonna full send the Turán force through. Now, before we actually do the push with the Turán 2s, bear in mind what the initial objectives are. The initial objectives are just to break through here and capture these two flags. No other objectives. We're going to already win in the next 8.5 minutes, so there's not really much of a point to push beyond that. But this offensive is going to go so well with the combined forces of these Tigers, Panzers, and Turáns that the main objectives are actually going to get expanded upon midway through this attack. And it is for situations like this that I love the Turán 2 so much. Set up a large firing line from Turán 2s. The enemy's already pinned down, forcing them to surrender, the ones that are in the forest, making it easier for any friendly infantry that are nearby. Fortunately, I think the enemy actually spotted the Turán setting up, so they called in artillery to try and disrupt it, but it was a little bit too little too late. So, at this point, primary objective completed. We've captured the two flags, we've destroyed all enemy resistance in this area, and the enemy doesn't have an immediate response. I was kind of expecting at this point to get immediately attacked and swarmed by enemy anti-tank aircraft. So there's a jumbo. Hold on a second. So we've completed our objectives. All right. At this point, could have stopped. Could have just pulled the Turán 2s into the lighter forest, set up some defensive positions, call it a day. But notice the 25mm anti-aircraft gun here. Notice how at this point, I know we lost an aircraft just now in that formation that flew over. This one's also probably going to get destroyed. If we were able to push through and destroy the enemy anti-aircraft guns, we would have complete aerial superiority, and the enemy would just be destroyed from the air. So at this point, the objective gets expanded. No longer do we just need to take these 2 flags, we need to push through these forested areas and hunt down any enemy anti-aircraft guns that we come across. We're not going to push down this road because there's the jumbo there, and we can't beat the jumbo. So we need to push through this light forest here, and we're going to push down this road here. And by breaking through and hopefully securing this road here, the enemy will no longer have reinforcements to help out over here on the right, and our friendly troops located over here will be able to push through. We'll start to take some losses from the enemy anti-tank teams in this area, but as long as we can break through and knock out the enemy anti-aircraft guns, this operation will have been a complete success. Alright, so over on the left side of the operation, we're starting to run out of Turans, and the enemy jumbo is now blocking our path. So, what we're going to do with the last bit of our armored strength is we're going to attack the jumbo from this direction with our 6 primary tanks, with these 6 tanks, and then, using the Turán 2s, attempt to destroy the jumbo. At this point, I realize that the jumbo, it's rear to the Turans, so I do want to try and get off at least a couple shots on it. Unfortunately, it was able to turn around before we were able to do that. Alright, we were able to knock out that Stuke before the Turans were finally finished, but I would consider that Turán push a complete success. The enemy's left with just a couple of anti-tank teams, jumbo. All of their AA was destroyed, meaning that Chopperton was able to send in his aircraft to just bomb the enemy out of the game from this point forward. At this point, I start to send in my own aircraft to start trying to knock out enemy artillery pieces, enemy tanks, whatever my aircraft can destroy, I will send them in to try and knock out. Which makes me a little bit sad that I didn't have any regular bomber Stukas in this division. I just had the anti-tank ones. Was able to push up his infantry to secure this forest over here. I believe I call in an off map on this forested area. No, I don't call in the off map over here. I call the off map over here to try and knock out the enemy anti-aircraft guns and artillery pieces that are set up here. Had I noticed that that had happened, I probably would have dropped the off-map here. But because I didn't see that the enemy artillery had already been destroyed, I think I'd call in the off-map on nothing.
Orfiumra van szükségünk. Magai elesett!
At this point, there's just nothing the enemy can do. They had invested so many points into anti-aircraft guns and just anti-tank units to try and stop. They had invested into so many anti-aircraft guns to stop our aircraft, which then got destroyed by the Turán 2s. They then invested a lot of their money into anti-tank units to stop the Turán 2s, which meant that when the infantry eventually rolled over, the anti-tank teams just couldn't stop them at all. And at this point, there's just nothing the enemy can do. Armored breakthroughs, like what happened over here, are some of the worst thing. It is the worst thing that can happen to an opponent. A successful armored breakthrough, because if tanks get into the backline, suddenly your anti-aircraft guns are destroyed. Suddenly your artillery pieces are destroyed. Suddenly your reinforcements are destroyed. Every point that the enemy fails to get to the front line is points that you don't have to deal with later.
Orfiumra van szükségünk.
So every anti-aircraft gun that you manage to destroy, that is like 40 points, that's 75 points, that could have been like a Sherman that you'd have to have dealt with. Every 80-point mortar that you manage to destroy is another, like, that's another tank you don't have to deal with. Every M10 or like mortar half-track that a bomber knocks out is a tank, one of your tanks saved. Had that D5 Stuka not knocked out that M10, that M10 might have knocked out one of my Turán 2s here. Now, well, it didn't really make that much of a difference because the match ended. But had the match not ended there, that flank would have been completely obliterated. There would have been nothing left. Yeah, the great thing about the Turán, another great thing about the Turán, I should say, because there's many great things about the Turán. I love the Turán. I would say it is objectively my favorite tank in this game. Is that because it's only 40 points, and I know I talked about this earlier, every enemy tank that you destroy costs twice as much as a Turán does. Meaning that even though all of my Turáns, except for 10, I started with 40 Turáns, only 10 of them were left at the end of the game, and that's just because they didn't make it into combat. Even though I lost just about every single, 75% of my tanks were destroyed. Even though I lost 75% of my tanks, I still had a great kill-to-death ratio of having over 1,000 more kills than I did have losses. If I had a force of Tigers, let me put this into perspective real quick. If I had Tigers instead of Turáns, I had fielded probably around 20 Turán 2s for that breakthrough on the right. 20. Had I used Tigers or Panthers instead, I would have only been able to field around 6. A breakthrough like that could not have occurred if I had been using Tigers. Maybe if I was using Panzer IVs. If I was using Panzer IVs, I probably could have gotten 14, 15 tanks out there. Had I been using heavier tanks, never would have happened. Those anti-tank teams in the forest would have destroyed all of them, would have completely ground to a halt. We would have we would have captured the two main the original objectives of those two flags, but we would not have been able to expand the objectives list, knock out the enemy anti-aircraft guns, and eventually push them back all the way to their spawn. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.